Jake Mitchell wiped the grease from his hands with an old cloth that had seen better days. The sun was setting outside his small garage, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had been working since 6 in the morning, fixing cars and engines, doing the kind of work that nobody really thanked him for. His back hurt, his fingers were stained with oil, and he was tired. But it was the same every day, and Jake had learned to accept that this was his life. The garage sat on the edge of the city, away from the fancy downtown area where skyscrapers stood tall and businessmen walked around with important looks on their faces. Out here, things were different. The streets were quieter, the buildings older and more worn. Some stores had closed down, and their empty windows stared out at nothing. It was the kind of place where people did not dream big. They just survived. Jake locked up the garage around 9:45 in the evening. He had a routine, and he never broke it. Every night, at exactly 10 o'clock, he would leave his small apartment above the garage and walk down the street with 2 bags of cat food and fresh water in containers. He bought the good food, the kind with real meat and nutrients. It cost him more than he should spend on stray cats, but Jake did not care what people thought about that. His coworker Danny had asked him once why he wasted money on animals that did not belong to him. Danny said that cats were not his responsibility, but Jake just shrugged and said nothing. He did not have the words to explain that he saw himself in those cats. They were abandoned, broken, and struggling to survive in a world that did not care about them. Maybe that was why he needed to feed them. Maybe it was because he understood how they felt. As Jake walked down the empty street, the first cat appeared. It was a gray tabby with white paws, and it came from behind an old building. The cat meowed softly, as if saying hello. Jake smiled and set down one of the bowls on the cracked sidewalk. The cat approached slowly and began to eat, its small head bent down over the food. More cats came. They came from everywhere, from shadows and alleyways and the spaces between buildings. There was an orange tom with a torn ear, 2 black cats that always moved together like they shared one mind, a beautiful calico with patches of white and brown, a fluffy white cat that looked like a cloud, and finally, a small tortoiseshell cat with eyes that seemed to hold something deep and knowing. 7 cats in total. Jake had named them all, though he was the only one who used those names. He called them Shadow, Tom, Night, and Storm, Patches, Cloud, and Little Artemis. That last name came to him one day when he was thinking about ancient mythology. The name just felt right for that small tortoiseshell cat that always watched him so carefully. Jake set out the bowls of food and fresh water. He sat down on a broken concrete step and watched them eat. The night was cool and quiet. There were no cars passing by, no people walking, just Jake and 7 cats in the darkness. He began to talk to them, sharing the thoughts that lived in his head. "You know," he said softly, watching the cats eat, "I had a wife once. Her name was Linda. She was beautiful, and I loved her very much. But I was not good at being married. I worked too much and talked too little. I did not know how to show her what I felt inside. One day she just left. She went to live with her sister in California, and I never saw her again. That was 5 years ago." The cats continued eating. They did not judge him. Shadow looked up at him with its gray eyes, and Jake could almost believe the cat understood every word. "I did not have any kids," he continued. "I think maybe that was a good thing. I might not have been a good father either. I am not good at much, really. I fix cars. That's what I do. It's not a big thing, not like being a doctor or a teacher or someone important. But people need their cars fixed, so I do it. I do not complain." Tom, the orange cat with the torn ear, jumped up onto the step beside Jake. The cat was warm and real, and Jake put his hand down gently. Tom did not pull away. Instead, the cat rubbed its head against Jake's hand, purring softly. "Thank you," Jake said quietly. "I don't have many friends. I don't talk to people much. But you cats, you are good company. You don't ask me for anything except food and water. You don't think I'm a failure. Or maybe you do, but you don't care." That is better than most people. The 7 cats ate their food while Jake sat with them. Sometimes one would look up and meet his eyes, and in those moments, Jake felt something strange. It was as if the cats were seeing past his skin, past his tired face and broken dreams, and seeing something deeper inside him. But he did not think too hard about that. He just accepted the feeling and moved on. By the time the cats finished eating, it was nearly 11 o'clock. Jake gathered up the empty bowls and the water containers. The cats watched him as he prepared to leave. They did not follow him. Instead, they seemed to melt back into the shadows, disappearing like they had never been there at all. Jake walked back to his apartment, his mind quiet and peaceful. This was the best part of his day, these 30 minutes with the cats. It was the only time he felt like he was doing something that mattered. He was not saving the world or changing lives. But he was keeping 7 small creatures alive, and that had to count for something. As he climbed the stairs to his apartment, Jake did not notice the strange golden light that appeared for just a moment in the eyes of each cat as they watched him disappear into the night. He did not know that somewhere, far beyond the reach of normal sight, a presence had been observing him. He did not understand that his simple act of kindness had made him visible to forces much older and more powerful than he could ever imagine. Jake Mitchell was just a mechanic who fed stray cats every night. He had no idea that those cats were watching him on behalf of a goddess who had been waiting for someone like him to appear. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first noticed something unusual happening in the city. It started with small things, nothing that seemed connected at first. But when Jake read the newspapers in the morning, or heard conversations at the diner where he sometimes bought coffee, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Victor Carver was the first person everyone talked about. He was a rich and powerful man who owned a large factory on the edge of the city. For 20 years, he had been dumping chemicals into the water supply that fed the neighborhoods near his factory. The poor families who lived there had no other choice but to drink the poisoned water. Children got sick, old people died. But Victor Carver did not care. He was making too much money. One day, without warning, Victor Carver had a breakdown. The newspaper said he walked into the city council office screaming about cats. He said there were cats everywhere, watching him. He claimed they had gold eyes that glowed in the dark. He said they followed him from the factory, to his mansion, to his office. He said he could not sleep. He said the cats would not leave him alone. Victor Carver was taken to a hospital for his mental health. But before anyone could help him, something happened. A journalist named Claire started investigating his factory. She found documents that Victor Carver had hidden. They proved everything, every crime, every poisoned batch of chemicals that he had dumped into the water on purpose. The news spread quickly. The government shut down his factory. His business partners ran away. His assets were frozen. Within 2 weeks, Victor Carver lost everything. Jake read this news and felt nothing special about it. Justice was justice. A bad man had finally been caught. That was how the world was supposed to work, though it rarely did. A councilman named Robert Phillips, who worked for the city government, was arrested. It turned out he had been stealing money that was meant for children's orphanages. The money was supposed to help kids who had no families and nowhere to go. Instead, Robert Phillips had put it in his own bank accounts. He had a yacht. He had 5 houses. All of it was stolen from orphans. Again, Jake read about this arrest without thinking too much about it. Bad people got caught sometimes. That was life. But what made him notice was something the newspaper said. The evidence that put Robert Phillips in prison came from an anonymous source. Someone had left files on a reporter's desk one night. Nobody knew who it was. It was as if the documents had appeared by magic. Then it was Vincent Cross, a pharmaceutical executive, who ran a drug company. The news reported that his company had tested dangerous medicines on homeless people without their permission. These people had become sick from the experiments. Some had died. Vincent Cross had hidden all of this information, and he had made millions selling the same medicines to regular people who thought they were safe. Vincent Cross was arrested when a huge pile of evidence suddenly appeared in the police station. Security cameras showed nothing. There was no explanation for how the files had arrived. But they were there, complete and organized, proving every crime. The police arrested him that same day. Jake was sitting at the diner when he heard 3 different people talking about these arrests. They all lived in his neighborhood. They all had poisoned his area in different ways, and they had all been caught in strange, unexplained ways. Something about this pattern made Jake uncomfortable, but he could not say why. That night, Jake went to feed the cats as always. He set out the bowls at exactly 10 o'clock. The cats came, the same 7 cats, and they ate their food calmly. As Jake watched them, he noticed something odd. The way they looked at him was different tonight. More focused, more aware. He could almost feel their eyes searching his face, trying to tell him something. After the cats had finished eating and disappeared back into the shadows, Jake found something he had not left there. It was an old leather journal, worn and brown, placed carefully on his doorstep. His name was written on the cover in beautiful handwriting. Jake's heart beat faster. He picked up the journal and looked around the empty street. There was nobody. Nobody at all. He went inside his apartment and opened the journal by lamplight. The first pages were filled with drawings of cats. Each drawing was detailed and perfect. There was Shadow, the gray tabby. There was Tom with his torn ear. There were Night and Storm, the 2 black cats. Patches was drawn with her calico patches, carefully shown. Cloud was sketched in all her fluffy glory. And there was Artemis, the small tortoiseshell, drawn with special care. But these were not ordinary drawings. Around each cat was a symbol. They were symbols that Jake did not recognize. They looked ancient, maybe from another language, maybe from another time. Some looked like stars, some looked like eyes, some looked like things he could not quite understand. On one page there was a single sentence, written in the same beautiful handwriting that had written Jake's name on the cover. The words read, "The innocent are never truly unguarded." Jake sat on his bed for a long time, staring at that sentence. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. There was nothing else written in the journal, just the drawings of the 7 cats and the mysterious symbols and that one sentence. He thought about Victor Carver going crazy about gold-eyed cats. He thought about the unexplained evidence that had appeared for Robert Phillips and Vincent Cross. He thought about how the cats always watched him so carefully. He thought about how they seemed to understand everything he said. But these thoughts were too big. They made his mind hurt. Jake closed the journal and put it under his bed. He told himself it was probably just a prank. Someone had probably found out about the cats in the journal and left it as a joke. That made more sense than the alternative, which was that the cats somehow knew about the crimes happening in his city and were helping justice to happen. As Jake lay in bed that night, he could hear the sounds of the city outside his window. Car horns, distant music, the wind moving through the empty streets. And underneath it all, he could swear he heard the soft sound of cats meowing. One voice, then another, then all 7 together, meowing in a pattern that was almost like language, almost like singing, almost like a prayer. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep did not come easily. In his dreams, he saw gold eyes watching him from every shadow. And in those dreams, he finally understood that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The first person to arrive at Jake's garage looking for shelter came on a Tuesday morning in October. Her name was Emma, and she was carrying a small boy who looked to be about 5 years old. She was thin and scared, and her eyes kept looking over her shoulder, as if she was expecting someone to chase her. Jake was working on an old truck when Emma knocked on the garage door. He was surprised to see a woman and a child standing in his workspace. Emma looked nervous, almost broken, but there was also something determined in the way she held her child close to her body. "I am sorry to bother you," Emma said quietly, "but the cats brought me here. They would not stop. They blocked my path when I was walking in a different direction. They circled around me and my son. They meowed and meowed until I followed them. They led me to this place." Jake put down his tools. He had no idea what to say. He almost laughed, but when he looked at Emma's face, he knew she was not joking. She believed what she was saying completely. "What happened?" Jake asked. "Why are you running?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. She told him a story that made Jake's heart break. She had been married to a man named David, who worked for a criminal organization. David had brought her into the business without her knowing. They used her as a way to move money through businesses. When Emma found out what was really happening, she wanted to leave. She wanted to take her son and go away. But David said she knew too much. He said she was a liability. One night he told her that she was going to disappear. He was going to arrange an accident, he said. She would be found in a car crash. Nobody would ask questions. Emma ran. She took her son in the middle of the night and ran from their house. She was thinking about jumping into the river just to end everything. That was when the white fluffy cat appeared, the cat that Jake called Cloud. Cloud had blocked her path. The cat had put itself between Emma and the bridge. Then more cats had come, all of them together, circling Emma and her son, meowing insistently. Emma had followed them because she did not know what else to do, and they had led her directly to Jake's garage. "I do not know why they brought me here," Emma said, "but I felt like I was supposed to come. I felt like this place was safe. I do not have anywhere else to go. I do not have any money. I do not have family, but I cannot let David find us. He will kill me and my son if he does." Jake looked at the boy, who was hiding his face in his mother's shoulder. The child was scared and hungry. Without thinking too much about what he was doing, Jake offered them food. He had soup and bread in his small kitchen upstairs. He told Emma she could stay in the back room of the garage for now. It was not much, but it was safe. Over the next 3 weeks, more people arrived. They all had the same story. The cats had led them to Jake's garage. They were all in danger. They all needed help. There was Kyle, a teenager who had witnessed a murder in the street. The orange Tom had guided him away from the scene, leading him through alleyways and hidden paths until he reached the garage. Then there was an old woman named Margaret, whose son had been dealing drugs and had made enemies of very bad people. The cats had appeared to her one morning and led her to safety. A young man named David came running to the garage bleeding from a knife wound. He had been attacked by people who wanted to harm him because he was going to testify against a gang in court. The 2 black cats, Night and Storm, had appeared and helped him escape. They had somehow led him through the city without the attackers finding him. Jake's small garage was becoming something he had never planned for. It was becoming a sanctuary. People were coming to him with broken lives and desperate situations. And somehow, the cats were choosing who to bring. The cats were directing broken people to a broken mechanic who lived a quiet life fixing cars. One night, as Jake was helping Emma and her son get settled into the back room, he had a strange dream. When he closed his eyes, he saw something that should have been impossible. He saw a figure made of pure starlight. The figure was massive, towering above the city itself. It had a face that was kind but powerful, and it looked down at him with eyes that held the weight of centuries. The figure did not speak in words. Instead, Jake felt meaning flowing directly into his mind. The presence told him things without using sound. It showed him visions of suffering across the world. It showed him people who had been abandoned by systems that were supposed to protect them. It showed him corruption hidden behind smiling faces and expensive suits. And then the presence showed him Jake himself. It showed Jake as he was, a tired mechanic with grease on his hands and sorrow in his heart. But when the presence looked at him, Jake saw something different. It saw kindness. It saw a man who cared for strays without asking for thanks. It saw someone who had nothing, but who was willing to share. The presence told Jake that this was the difference between humanity's best and worst. The worst took everything they could for themselves. They stepped on others to climb higher. They saw the suffering around them and did not care. But the best, the truly good ones, they gave even when they had little to give. They cared when it was easier not to care. Jake woke up with tears on his face. He understood, though he did not know how he understood, that the cats were not actually animals. They were something else. They were extensions of something greater, something divine. They were watching on behalf of a goddess, a being of justice who had decided to use Jake's garage as a place where broken people could find safety. When morning came, Jake looked at the 7 cats sitting in his garage. They looked like ordinary cats, but he saw them differently now. He saw the light inside them. He saw the purpose. He knew that whatever was happening, whatever role he was being asked to play, he would accept it. Because these people needed help. And for the first time in his life, Jake Mitchell had the chance to truly matter to someone. 3 months after Emma had arrived at his garage, Jake's life had transformed completely. The sanctuary he had created was now home to 15 people. Some had arrived through the cat's guidance. Others had heard stories and came seeking refuge. Jake had become something he never expected to be. He had become a protector. But protection was about to become much harder. There was an organization that existed in the shadows of the city, and they were beginning to notice Jake's activities. The organization called themselves the Ascendants. They were people who believed that power and money were the only things that mattered in the world. They worshipped greed. They had no problem with corruption. In fact, they created it. They profited from it. And they were not happy about the recent series of events that were destroying their criminal networks. The Ascendants had realized something. Their operations were failing. Their carefully built systems of crime and corruption were collapsing. Someone or something was working against them, exposing their secrets, helping their victims escape. And that someone seemed to have a connection to a small mechanic's garage on the edge of the city. The Ascendants decided that Jake Mitchell needed to disappear. One evening, a man in an expensive suit came to the garage. His name was Marcus, and he worked for the Ascendants as a recruiter. He tried to befriend Jake. He offered him money. He said that Jake could be part of something greater, something powerful. He said that the Ascendants could make Jake rich and important. All Jake had to do was stop helping the refugees. All he had to do was close his garage to broken people. Jake refused quietly. He did not argue. He did not get angry. He simply said no. Marcus left, but the threat hung in the air. Jake knew that refusing the Ascendants was dangerous. They were not used to being told no. That night, Jake called a meeting with everyone living in his garage. He told them what had happened. He told them that danger was coming. He explained that staying with him might not be safe anymore. He gave them the choice to leave. Nobody left. Emma said that she trusted the cats. A young man named Marcus said that this was the first time in his life he felt like someone cared about him. An old woman named Ruth said that she was too old to run anymore, and if she was going to die anyway, at least she wanted to die in a place where she felt loved. One by one, each person said they would stay. 3 days later, A bomb threat was called into the police. Someone had planted what they said was an explosive device at Jake's garage. The police came and evacuated the area. They searched the building thoroughly. No bomb was found. But the message was clear. The Ascendants were getting serious. That same night, Jake was working alone in his garage when he heard movement. His heart raced. He thought he was about to be attacked. But instead of danger, he found something magical. All 7 cats appeared at once. They circled Jake in the middle of the garage, moving in a perfect pattern around him. As they circled, their forms began to change. They started glowing with an inner light that was golden and pure. The light grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire garage. Jake had to close his eyes against the brightness. When he opened his eyes again, the cats had become something else. They were still cats, but they were made of light and energy. They were beautiful and terrible and wonderful all at once, and in the center of their circle, a presence formed. It was the same towering figure Jake had seen in his dream, but now it was real and standing before him. The goddess Astrea appeared in full form. She was ancient and powerful, and her eyes held the memory of all the injustice that had ever been committed on Earth. She looked at Jake with sadness and with hope. "I am Astrea," she said, and her voice was like the sound of stars singing. "I have watched your world for thousands of years. I have watched as greed consumed your people. I have watched as the innocent suffered while the guilty grew fat and comfortable. I have waited for someone like you, Jake Mitchell. Someone who would show kindness when they had no obligation to do so. Someone who would care for the broken without expecting reward. Someone with a heart that still believed in justice." Jake fell to his knees. He could not speak. He could not think. The presence of the goddess was overwhelming. She was power itself, ancient and infinite. "I have chosen your garage as my foothold in your world," Astrea continued. "These 7 cats are my eyes and my hands. They will see what you cannot see. They will act where you dare not act. You will help me, Jake Mitchell. Together we will bring justice to this broken world. Through them, I have brought the guilty to justice and guided the innocent to safety. But now you must choose, Jake. You can refuse this burden. You can go back to your quiet life of fixing cars and feeding strays. I will not force you. Or you can accept that you are now my champion on Earth. Either way, you are already bound to this destiny. You have always been bound to it. The moment you first fed those hungry cats, you chose this path." Jake looked up at the goddess. He thought of Emma and her son. He thought of Kyle, who had been ready to give up on life. He thought of all the people who had found safety in his garage. He thought of all the injustice that continued to happen every single day in his city and around the world. He thought of people like Victor Carver and Robert Phillips and Vincent Cross, who had harmed others without consequence. "I accept," Jake said simply. "I will do what you ask." Astrea's form began to fade, but her voice remained clear. "Then prepare yourself, Jake Mitchell. The Ascendants will come for you with violence. They will try to destroy everything you have built, but you are no longer alone. Justice itself fights with you now. The innocent will not fall. The guilty will be exposed. This is my promise to you." The cats returned to their normal forms, but they glowed softly now with the light of the goddess. They approached Jake and surrounded him with warmth. Jake held each one, and as he did, he felt power flowing through him. It was not the power to fight or to hurt. It was the power to see truth. It was the power to protect. It was the power of justice itself. When morning came, Jake found that all 15 people living in his garage were awake and standing together. They had felt the presence of the goddess too. They had all received a message, wordless but clear. Their time of hiding was ending. It was time to fight back. It was time for justice to be done. The work of justice began immediately. With the guidance of the goddess and the protection of the 7 cats, Jake and the people living in his garage became an unstoppable force against corruption. They worked carefully and methodically, collecting evidence, finding witnesses, and bringing truth to light. Emma used her knowledge of her husband's criminal organization to help authorities understand how the networks operated. Kyle testified about the murder he had witnessed, helping to put a gang leader behind bars. Ruth helped identify victims of various crimes who were afraid to come forward. One by one, the pieces of the Ascendant's empire began to crumble. Journalists started arriving at Jake's garage, led by the cats, just like everyone else had been. They brought cameras and notebooks. They interviewed the people living there. They listened to stories of survival and injustice. These journalists published articles that spread across the city and then across the country. The truth was too big to hide anymore. The police, finally armed with real evidence and real witnesses, began making arrests. Low-level members of the Ascendants were taken into custody. Mid-level managers were exposed. Business partners were questioned. The criminal network that had operated for decades with impunity was being dismantled, piece by piece. But the leader of the Ascendants remained free. His name was Dr. Charles Carlson, and he was a brilliant man who had hidden his crimes well. He was a wealthy businessman who owned hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. He had hidden his involvement in the Ascendants so carefully that nobody could prove anything against him. But the goddess saw him. She saw everything he had done, and she would not let him escape justice. One night, the small tortoiseshell cat called Artemis came to Jake while he was sleeping. The cat did not meow. Instead, Jake heard the goddess's voice in his mind, clear and powerful. Dr. Carlson is meeting with his associates in an abandoned warehouse on the east side of the city, she said. He is planning to flee the country tomorrow. He believes he has hidden his crimes well enough to escape. You must go to him. You must confront him. Do not be afraid. Justice will be with you. Jake woke up immediately. He told Emma where he was going. She wanted to come with him, but he told her to stay with the others. This was something he had to do alone. As he prepared to leave the garage, all 7 cats lined up at the door. They did not follow him into the night, but they watched him with eyes that glowed softly in the darkness. The warehouse was cold and empty, except for Dr. Carlson and 3 men who worked for him. When Jake entered, walking slowly and calmly, Dr. Carlson looked surprised. He had expected police, perhaps, or soldiers. He had not expected a tired mechanic in work clothes. Jake Mitchell, Dr. Carlson said with a laugh, the famous protector of broken people. I have heard so much about you. I must say, you are disappointing. You are just an ordinary man. You have no power. You have no wealth. You have nothing that matters. I know, Jake said simply. I have never claimed to be anything else. But I know something that you do not. I know that there is more in this world than power and money. There is justice. There is truth. And those things cannot be bought or hidden forever. Dr. Carlson's confidence began to crack. The 3 men with him moved forward, ready to hurt Jake if necessary. But then something happened that would haunt Dr. Carlson for the rest of his life. The cats appeared. All 7 of them emerged from the shadows of the warehouse, moving in perfect formation. But they were not ordinary cats anymore. They glowed with divine light. They were beautiful and terrible. They were the justice of the goddess made manifest in physical form. Dr. Carlson fell to his knees. He saw in those cats something that broke him. He saw all the people he had hurt. He saw the children in his hospital who had been given dangerous medicines. He saw the workers he had exploited. He saw the families he had destroyed for profit. He saw it all reflected in the eyes of the goddess's cats. And finally, broken by the weight of his own crimes, Dr. Carlson confessed. He told the police everything when they arrived. He named every member of the Ascendants. He gave up every secret. He revealed every hidden account and every crime. He broke completely, unable to bear the judgment of the divine beings before him. In the weeks that followed, the entire Ascendance organization was brought down. 53 people were arrested. Billions of dollars in stolen money were recovered. Victims received justice. The sick people who had been used as test subjects were given compensation and help. The city began to heal. Jake's small garage transformed into something much larger. The local government helped him expand it. It became an official sanctuary for people in danger. It became a place where victims of crime could come for protection and support. It became a center for justice and hope. Jake continued his nightly ritual of feeding the 7 cats, but now dozens of people watched. The community understood that these cats were special. They understood that they represented something greater than themselves. People came to the garage at 10 o'clock every night just to see the cats being fed. It became a symbol of hope. It became a ritual that reminded everyone that justice was real and that kindness mattered. Years passed, and Jake grew older. His hair turned gray. His hands became more weathered. But his eyes remained kind, and his heart remained true. More people came to help him at the sanctuary. Emma became his assistant, running the day-to-day operations. Kyle became a social worker, helping victims of crime rebuild their lives. One final night, when Jake was an old man, the 7 cats came to him once more. As he sat feeding them, the goddess appeared one last time. She looked at him with a softness that had not been there before. "You have done well, Jake Mitchell," Astrea said. "You have shown your world that one person can make a difference. You have proven that kindness and justice can overcome greed and corruption. I came to Earth seeking a champion, but I have found something more. I have found hope." The goddess continued, "Humanity no longer needs me to work through shadows and animals. Your people are awakening. Others like you are rising up. The scales are tipping. Justice is becoming possible again. Continue your work, old friend, and know that every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, ripples through the universe. You have changed more than you will ever know." Jake felt tears on his old face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me." The goddess smiled, and her light faded into the night. The 7 cats meowed softly, and then they returned to being just cats. But their eyes still held that divine spark, a reminder that magic existed in the world, and that it favored those with good hearts. Jake Mitchell had been just a mechanic who fed stray cats every night. But he had become something more. He had become a symbol of what humanity could be when it chose justice over greed, compassion over cruelty, and love over fear.